Hi there, just June here. So I was watching a video and it struck a chord with me, which made me decide to make a video myself. There was this smaller channel, and I believe it's called Ghostapostate, and this young woman made a video. I think it was entitled Worst Bible Story Ever. And she talks a little about all the various Bible stories out of the original Bible story book, which I think is from 1979 or 1980, which was the Bible story book, I was brought up on, and from the Jehovah's Witnesses. And before she said what she thought the worst Bible story was, I was thinking in my head, what do I think is the worst Bible story? And two came to mind. And the first one that came to mind was Dinah, which people might think Dinah. And the second one that came to mind was Noah's Ark, and I'm thinking about the pictures for Noah's Ark. Now, she said, Dinah. I was shocked that that was the story she picked. And I highly suggest you go to her channel and listen to her whole explanation of why this story is so bad. And because I'm not going to just reiterate everything she exactly said, but I'm going to explain why this story was so bad for me personally and how it correlates with all of the CSA and the CSA cases that are going on, and why I think so many CSA victims have such a hard time coming out and speaking about CSA. So, as a young girl, I've talked about it in some videos. I am a CSA survivor. Now, my abuser was not a Jehovah's Witness, it was a neighbor who had nothing to do with the Jehovah's Witness organization. And I'm not going to get into the whole story, that's really not the point, nor do I want to make myself upset. So, anyways, the point is, I was very young. I was from ages 5 to 7. And that is exactly the ages I was when this book came out. The My Book of Bible Stories came out. And the story of Dinah was initially, when that page first turned open, I remember thinking how pretty Dinah was. And I was just taken by how beautiful I thought she was. And in the picture, and I'm going off memory because I don't have the book anymore, she was very plain and she just had on a white dress, but she was just very lovely. And from what I remember, she looked to be about maybe 19, 20 years old. And I remember thinking, when I grow up, I want to look like her. I want to be very pretty like her. But then I read the story, or my parents read me the story, I should say. I was just learning to read at the time. And so, I needed help. And this is what the young woman brought out in her explaining of why the story was so bad. And it's why that's why this story came to mind, is why it was so bad to me. In the story of Dinah, number one, typical of the Jehovah's Witness organization, they add to the story compared to what the actual biblical account says. In the Bible story book, from what she said, and I'm basing this on what she said because I should have looked it up, because it is on the jw.org website, I believe. It says that she goes against her parents, and I'm pretty sure that is what it says, because I remember, my parents talking about her disobeying her parents. And That's not what the biblical account says. I did look up the biblical account because I do have a Bible, and it says nothing about her disobeying her parents. And then it goes on to explain how she goes out and, associates with worldly people. And that's when she gets caught up and ends up, being forced to lie down with this man who's much older than her. And then, a bunch of other bad things happen. Her brothers go and, kill people. It all turns out very bad. The point is, at the end of the story, victim blaming happens. Because the moral of the story is, by her going and associating with worldly people, that's why this happened to her. She is SA'd because she went out and did this to herself. She went out and hung out with worldly people, and that's why she was forced to lie down with this man. Now, the girl that has this other channel pointed out that, number one, as much as I was taken with how beautiful this picture of this young woman was, it's not accurate. If you look into what historians have to say, Dinah was most likely between 13 and 15 years old. Not like the 20-year-old that's depicted in the Bible storybook. So, number one, a minor. And so also, probably doesn't have the best judgment. And also, we're talking about CSA, not just SA, and not that either of those things are good. They're both crimes. But we're talking about a child here. And it's made out still that she's to blame. She's to blame because she should have known better. It's all her fault. And so this is where it comes back to me. I remember reading this story with my parents, and I wanted to try to explain to my parents what was happening with me at the time. But because this was happening with somebody worldly, after I read this story, I thought it was my fault that it was happening, that this SA was happening to me. Now, the details I will give you about the abuse that was happening to me was that it was a young man in his mid-teens. I was between the ages of 5 and 7, and he was doing this to me and his sisters, who were my age also. And he would show us his parents' gun that was underneath his parents' bed when they were not at home, because this was the 70s and we all got left by ourselves most of the time. And he would pull out the gun, show it to us, and tell us that if we did not do what he said to do, he would shoot our parents. Not us, our parents. And he told me if I did not come back and continue to do it, he would shoot my parents. So I felt sort of stuck because I was 5 and I was sure he was going to do what he said. And then I felt guilty because I was at a family member's house who was babysitting me, who was not a Jehovah's Witness, and they were who had allowed me to go play with these worldly kids. And so I thought, you know, I was doing all these bad things with these worldly people. So here I am, this small child, and all of this Jehovah's Witness ridiculousness is running through my head because the Bible storybook had come out, and the story of Dinah was what was running through my head, and I thought it was all my fault. And so therefore, as many times as I kept trying to get the courage to tell my parents of what was going on, I would burst into tears every time, and I would fail to tell them. It took me until I was 19 years old to tell them what had happened. Now, the thing is, as some of you might also know that watch my channel, my husband's father, who is now dead, was a convicted pedophile. He was an elder who was abusing little girls that were my age, just like my story, in the congregation. Exact my age. Like my story, 5-7-year-old girls. That's who he was sexually abusing in the congregation. And so I think to myself now, as a 50-some-year-old woman, if I had been in their congregation and known them when I was a young girl, worldly would not have come into play. It would have had nothing to do with anything. That story of Dinah would not have played out because I could have been friends with my husband's sisters, been at their house playing, and my father-in-law could have been my abuser, an elder in the congregation. What do you have to say now, Watchtower? And he was a convicted felon for abusing Jehovah's Witness girls in a congregation in New York State. And you guys know it. It's on record. So they can say whatever they'd like. But they're making young ones with their stories feel as though it's their fault. But that's not the case. And I hope anyone out there that has been made to feel like something they did, maybe a dress they wore, having cleavage out, the way if they flirted a little bit, the way that you were questioned if you are brought before the elders because of CSA or SA is disgusting. And I'm here to tell you it is not your fault. And you shouldn't have to go through any of those questions. The elders should be going directly to the police, not to any branch department, the legal department at Bethel. That's not how it should work. So it was a thought. I thought I would share it with you. I hope all of you are having a good summer. I know I've been having a good summer, but this little video that, came across my feed made me really think. And I just hope that everyone that is dealing with these CSA cases gets the justice they deserve. I hope, again, all of you are having a wonderful summer. And I hope to be making more videos again sometime in the fall soon. And until then, remember, be yourself and be well.